answer is no. Nicaragua, sí.
Green wall.
crucial period today for all of us, especially here in Miami. It's a most important day. Most important day. Because as the American people have come to know, the struggle of the poor, the struggle for justice, the struggle for peace must start at home. And the people of the United States, finally, after many years, have said no to war in a voice that has been heard in the House of Representatives. To start our day, I will introduce Reverend John Powers.
Your blessing upon this gathering. We ask that you enable us to be the instruments of your peace and of your justice. We pray in the spirit of your shalom. Amen. That we somehow represent a minority opinion in this country. We, in fact, represent the majority opinion on this one. With almost all of the major religious denominations in this country, we stand in harmony with most of our country's allies, like the Western European nations, like Canada, and virtually all of the Latin American nations, in supporting peaceful negotiations and for standing against.
Administration has accused the Nicaraguan government of religious persecution. Many religious leaders of the United States have gone down to Nicaragua and have come back to tell us that religion flourishes now more than ever in Nicaragua. The Reverend Linnea Pearson, who has been in the forefront for the struggle for peace,
today in the spirit and the name of the first woman in the history of the world to lead her people in a non-violent revolution, Corazon Aquino of the Philippines. I want to speak in the name of Corazon Aquino and her party, the Laban Party. This is their sign, the sign of the open hand. It's a sign for peaceful, non-violent resistance to evil. I speak today in the name of Corazon Aquino, of the people of the Philippines, of the people of Haiti, of the people of South Africa, of the people of Nicaragua, and of all the people in the world who are struggling to be free. That is why we gather here today in the name of all of those people. Lincoln. She was elected in 1916. To get out of their way and let them have it. I speak in the name, and we are gathered here today in the name of the struggling peoples of the world who want peace and justice. Power to the people. Laban, right on.
Process, we know we are going to introduce is Rabbi Rami Shapiro, who will speak on behalf of the concerned Jewish community here in Dade County.
The 20th century called the age of fear. Fear, more than any other human emotion, is what processes the facts of our existence. We fear our neighbors, lest they turn against us. We fear our friends, lest they come too close to us. We fear the stranger, lest we recognize the strangeness inside ourselves. We fear the communists, the capitalists, the environmentalists, the peaceniks, the rich and the poor. And most of all, we fear ourselves. If there is a Judas among us who will sell out the messianic dream of peace, the Judas lies within fear. It's because of fear that we set in motion the dark forces of war, preferring the brilliant flash of bombs to the more subtle but more permanent light of peace. But if we are to end the fighting, if we are to stop the lies, we must end the fear and let in the light of truth. It is reasonable to want democracy for Nicaragua. Of all systems of government, democracy is the most humane, the most liberating. It is reasonable to wish to see the Sandinistas open their country to the full flower of freedom. No revolution is to be judged by its rhetoric. Deeds only speak the truth. But it's also reasonable to seek peace in every way possible. But is it reasonable to seek peace by funding violence? Isn't it reasonable to place the hope of democracy in the hands of terrorists? Is it reasonable to expect democracy to grow from the arid, poisonous soil of wanton terror? If reason is to prevail over rhetoric, be it rhetoric from the right or the left, if truth is to silence the lies of fearful politicians, if democracy is to become a reality in a region that knows so little democracy, there is only one path open to us: to banish fear and to speak truth to power. There are those who fear peace with the Sandinistas because they question their sincerity. And with them we stand beside the Jewish sages of old who said, "Better an insincere peace than a sincere war." There are those who bury even the most righteous cause beneath the poisonous barbs of absurd propaganda. And to them we stand with Moses and we proclaim, "Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor." Let us banish fear. Let us open ourselves to truth. Let us banish falsehood and open ourselves to the light. Let us put aside cries for war and set our feet upon the long road toward peace. Let us do this now that we might transform this age of fear into an age of truth.
Fear is what makes us look to the other side instead of to the speaker when they're speaking. The police said to us yesterday that the reason that we cannot understand, that the reason why they gave the permit across the street, they said, was to ensure our safety. The police said that the best way they could ensure our safety was to have us across the street from that crowd. The police has to protect us from eggs and rocks. Nevertheless, across the street, I read a sign. That sign said, "Congressman Lehman discriminates against Latins." That's a lie. Who is the head of the Young Democrats of Dade County, and at the same time is assistant to the congressman, to Congressman Lehman. Let's give him a big welcome.
For the past several weeks, we've been seeing this increased debate on the Contra issue, heightened debate, and it's really been stripped down by the Reagan administration to a very black and white issue. Either you support $100 million in aid and you support freedom, or you oppose aid and you're against freedom. That if you support aid, you're a patriot, you're a traitor. Well, I've got news for you. 222 members of Congress, including 16 Republicans, members of Reagan's own party, demonstrated this past Thursday that those are not the choices at hand. These 222 people care enough about our country and freedom to realize that continued intervention in Nicaragua and other regions of the world through militarism is not the answer. Other alternatives. We are a country whose grain bins burst at the seams, go out of business and seek survival for their own lives. World, instead of what we can do with them.
We must listen to what we say here to each other. We must listen to our speakers, because only through our organ are we going to elect those political representatives that are going to be able to enact into laws those measures that we deem necessary, and we must organize. Today, we have the honor to have with us. Please look at us. Look at us. Today, we have the honor to have with us a man that has always stood for the better things, the better traditions of the United States. In moments when no other politician, no other elected official would dare speak, he spoke, and he has spoken. He has been an advocate of civil rights. He has advocates of peace. He has been an advocate for things like we are experiencing here today. Please, let's give a rousing welcome to State Senator Jack Gordon.
In spite of all the problems, I guess I'm a little taller than he is. In spite of all the problems, I'm really happy to be here among friends, and you all are friends. There are questions on which reasonable people can disagree. This may be one of them. I notice that my colleague from the Florida Senate, Senator Roberta Fox, is standing across the street with the egg throwers. So you see, Roberta Fox and I can be on different sides of some issues. But I don't think we need to be on other sides of issue by throwing eggs or rocks. That's not the American tradition. And if we've learned anything today, we've learned that our school system, our media, needs to help us to Americanize the people in our community to understand what free speech and what the First Amendment really means. You know, I made an offer to Mayor Suarez yesterday, and I said, if Alpha 66 will send some people to debate on television or radio with Mike Friedman and myself, I would do what I could to persuade this rally to be called off, and they would do the same thing. They didn't want to do that. They don't want public dialogue. They don't want to use the First Amendment the way it's supposed to be used. The way the Founding Fathers meant that here was an opportunity for rational discourse. But I'm here today because, as a Democrat and elected official, I want to support Speaker O'Neill in his analysis of the situation in Nicaragua. Because I know that Speaker O'Neill uttered the truth when he said if we pass the Contra aid, it will not be too long before there are American troops fighting in Nicaragua. And who needs that? Don't forget that the Contra aid called for American military advisors, quote, to go with the aid into Honduras to train the troops. And some of us are old enough to remember that that's precisely the way we got started in Vietnam. And we don't need to get started that way. I think it's important for us to remember, as another speaker pointed out, that we represent certainly half the country, more than half of the House of Representatives. And that's a tribute. And that's a tribute to the good sense of the American people. Because the American people support the Congress and understand that the aid to the Contras is only going to turn us into a more militarized country. That when President Reagan went on the radio, on the television a week ago, or a week before the vote, to urge support, all the commentators said he was about 12 votes short. And with his speech, and with all the money spent on advertising to get people to call up in those districts, all over the country, they put on a big campaign, they spent millions of dollars for ads in hometown newspapers, he lost by the same 12 votes. So the American people have the understanding and the sense to know that just because the president says it, it isn't always true. And that's been true with Democratic presidents as well as Republican presidents. You just have to remember what Mark Twain said, you have to be loyal to the country, you don't necessarily have to be loyal to the forms of government.
We are not afraid to be free, and we know we have to pay a price to be free.
Let me clarify something before we continue. Some of the people across the street, perhaps many of the people across the street, are Cubans. I am Cuban too, and there are many Cubans in this crowd as well. There are many Cubans in the city of Miami that are not there with them today and do not agree with them today. Those people across the street throwing the eggs and the rocks do not stand in the best tradition of the Cuban people. Because we stand in the best tradition of free peoples everywhere, no matter whether it is in Nicaragua, whether it is in Cuba, or whether it is in Miami. Democracy is not something that is talked about in the radio like they do. Democracy is what you practice every day of your life. But here, it is good that it happens, because it reflects something that must be corrected, something that must be confronted, and something that must be solved. Larry
is presently in this 28th day of a fast in honor of the struggle for justice and peace in our country, so that we can begin to turn this government in Washington around to be concerned about the needs of people and not about blowing up the rest of the world. Ray?
Today reminds me of the 60s, when we held our peace demonstrations and our demonstrations for justice and freedom for black people in this country. When we were pelted with rocks and sticks and eggs, and the police sat back and watched it happen. Today is a vivid reminder of those days. The problem with mankind today then was that there's too much hatred around, that we've got to learn to love one another. We've got to learn to love each man as our brother. It's happened, and we must now do something about it. Those who control our government do not represent the feeling of the people of America. Americans do not want war. Americans do not want us to go into other countries and take their land. Americans do not want us to support apartheid in South Africa. Americans do not want us to continue to destroy the natural resources of the world for our own greedy purposes. We have got to begin to identify the real problem. The question that is in my mind is to the Reagan administration and to those who continue to, is that if Russia and if communism is the problem in the world today, then why is America loaning the Russian government $400 million of our money? We must stand strong together. And we must say that it's not black versus white, it's wrong versus right. And if we must deal with the problems that we face in the world today, then we must base our judgment on, is it right? Is it right to kill? Is it right to steal?
An elected official that has many times before been very outspoken against terrorism in our community. We have fought for the poor and for the disadvantaged. He is Representative Mike Priestman. Big hands.
Trying to advocate is what you're denying others the right to have. You want to give to others the right to come and speak without fear of repression, without fear of retaliation. Please understand that democracy carries with it some degree of risks. We all agree on that we could find a hell of a lot better use for those eggs in that we have people, children, in our community that are hungry. I would argue that we could put those eggs, all of us together, to much better use than using them as missiles to disrupt what you're advocating for others to have, which is the right to speak out. And that we all agree to. Now let's reflect a moment. Let's lessen the volume of the rhetoric and reflect. Because at 11 o'clock today, once again we came to the reality of living in a generation that has the capacity to annihilate mankind as we know it. The United States tested today in the Nevada desert a nuclear device. The reason I tell you that is what the ultimate future is if we don't change the means by which we address our differences. The desert in Nevada. That's not our destiny if we choose to stand up and say, the old ways that we can no longer accept. The United States. I want to agree with him on two things today. One is that the tide is changing, and democracy is beginning to regain a foothold. That's something we got to keep in mind. The wave of freedom and democracy is sweeping, and the realization that the president came to is that it sweeps out the repressive right as well as the dictatorial that feels that its policy has to be validated on the backs of children. We reject that. Now, if I might tell you that the president is also right, because this is a historical point. This is a point of decision. And we come today to say to those who courageously stood up, thank you, we stand with you. And we say to those in the Senate that will make the decision, consider carefully, because this is a historical decision. Will we, in front of the tide of democracy, or will we obstruct its flowing from Central America, Africa, and the Asiatic continent? Will we stand in the way? Why is this wave of democracy coming to the world today? It's not because we have the capacity to destroy ourselves, but more and more people are seeing the opportunities that come from freedom, from democracy, from self-determination. And we today stand as an example. And those people are a little bit concerned, I think, in what they see today. Because they long for a democracy that tolerates difference. They long for the opportunity to express a point of view without concern of having eggs or rocks or missiles or bullets to be thrown on them. That's what we want to provide for all the children of the world. Make no mistake about it. Make no mistake about it. The consensus in Washington is something must be done to deal with providing free opportunities for all people. The issue that's so critical is what we do. What we do to provide opportunities for people to realize the full potential that a free and democratic society has. What do? Do we support the other fledgling democracies in the region? If we're true to our word, if we respect democracy, by God, please listen, controlled enough and courageous enough to support the democratic will of the people of the region. Why is it that we cannot exhaust negotiation? Why is that? That happens to be the American way. To work in cooperation with other players in the region. And there are some democracies. How do you say, I'm glad to have you as a democratic nation? The moment they stand up and assert themselves and say, we don't want to listen to you. We know good what is in your best interest. That's not democracy. That's not democracy. One. It's tolerable in our society to do what the Soviet Union today is doing to the people of Afghanistan. No! We will not allow that to happen. Because it's wrong. Because it's wrong whether it comes from the right or from the left to impose your military might to bring out your policy on other people. That's wrong. That is absolutely wrong. And it's un-American, because what is American is whenever we have had to use our might and our force, it is as a last resort. The American public will not stand for us not exhausting every means possible to achieve democratic solutions that are consistent with our principles and our beliefs. We need to have the courage to work towards that. I asked the United States Senate to consider one thing, and I finish on this note. And if some on this side disagree with me, I'm sorry, but life is made up of adjusting to disagreements and handling our disagreements better than otherwhere. So I just asked them to consider one thing. Forget the rhetoric for a minute. Forget the dollars for a minute. And let's look at the ultimate victims. And let us be honest to those ultimate victims when we say to the children, when we take a child who doesn't know about whether it's the right heel or the left heel that's repressing them, child doesn't know whether it is the communist or the fascist that's denying her a meal, nor does the child care. Child doesn't know if the bullet is coming from one side or the other, the child is dead. I ask the members of the Senate and each and every person to look in the eyes of a child. And if you could say to that child, we have done everything to achieve an opportunity for you to live without fear of the future. If we can say honestly to that child, we have done all that we could to give you the opportunity that you deserve, if we can honestly make that statement, then and only then should we consider using military force anywhere in the world. We stand together against repression. We disagree on how to realize the opportunities that come in democracy. We need to manage our disagreement in a way that is compatible with our tenets and our belief of what a free and democratic world is. We don't achieve our ultimate objective that we seek. Ladies and gentlemen, together and only together can we make a step to a more peaceful world. And I thank you for being here and taking the time to listen.
In here pointed out is that these right-wing Cuban radio stations are not professional journalists. They have violated their code of ethics because they have gone on the air consistently and threatened us and attempted to terrorize us, and we do not recognize that type of activity as legitimate journalistic activity. In fact, I would go so far as to say that it is really stretching the First Amendment. You know, you don't have the right to cry fire in a movie. Spanish radio stations. These people claim to respect democracy. This is the type of democracy that they support. This is a piece of glass that a gentleman was hit by here this afternoon. The whole purpose of their demonstration is to silence us. But this demonstration is making one thing clear, and that is the days of terrorist intimidation, the days of only one side being heard, the days of the Miami community being silenced are over. There is going to be a political debate in this community, whether the right-wing Cuban terrorists like it or not. Whether the Miami City Commission liked it or not, and whether President Reagan and the Republican Party in Dade County likes it or not. As a pro-Nicaraguan revolution has been, we want aid in Central America. Our organization wants aid for Nicaragua. It's our bombs that have wreaked havoc in Nicaragua, that have murdered innocent civilians, and we should help to rebuild Nicaragua. We should give aid to the 500,000 Nicaraguan refugees that have fled from Contra terror in the countryside. And for those that say that the Contras are freedom fighters, let me ask them this, and this is what these people want to silence here. They're afraid of the truth. And I am speaking the truth, and the reason why the Contras are winning is because their policies and their politics and their actions are immoral. It is the Nicaraguan people and it is the Sandinista government that has the moral high ground in this conflict, and that's why even here in the belly of the beast, an organization that supports the Nicaraguan revolution is able to speak out and is going to speak out with the truth about what's going on in Central America. The last point I want to make is why, this is the point I was going to make a moment ago, if the Contras are such freedom fighters, why is it that after 5 years being backed by the strongest military power on earth, they cannot control 1 pound or 1 inch of territory and have peace and goodwill towards the Nicaraguan people? United, we will win. The people united will never be defeated. El pueblo El pueblo Viva Viva
Viva Nicaragua Libre! Viva el Frente Sandinista!
Thank you very much, Jack. El pueblo unido jamás será vencido. 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 ¡Viva Nicaragua Libre! Muchas gracias. The next person on our agenda to speak to us today is the co-chairperson of the Coalition for a Free South Africa. A person who has been very involved in the struggle for freedom in Haiti and also in Central America, Mr. Roux Jean Bart of the Haitian Refugee Center.
I won't be like Jack. I bring greetings to you from the Haitian community. Father Jean-Jus, who was expected to be here today, unfortunately has not been able to make it from Haiti. We are asking, we don't need weapons. What we need, is food to feed the hungry. What we need is money to help education. What we need in this world now, be it in Haiti or in Philippines or wherever, is more money to help the people. Instead of feeding the corrupt government of the Marcos and Duvaliers, the U.S. should be feeding the hungry of the world. Instead of running weapons, they should be helping them with education. Those who have had power for so long now are willing to ask the U.S. to intervene. I'm sure that those of you freedom-loving people and peace-loving people will stand by side with the Haitian people and call for no intervention from the U.S.
Please give a big welcome to Margaret Shapiro.
Good friends, I was very shocked to hear Jack Gordon say that Roberta Fox was across the street. I find it hard to believe and very disappointing.
Not for me.
But I found Representative Pepper on television the other night hard to believe and very disappointing. Pepper has come a long way from his beginnings when he was a true friend of the people. And he's no friend of any of us now. When I first came here this morning, I was holding up our sign, the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, and the people across the street hollered over, "Communist old lady." I don't mind being called a communist or being called an old lady, but I wonder what kind of people throw eggs at old ladies. It seems there's a better way to deal with it. Our organization believes that poverty and oppression are the roots of war, and it's by dealing with poverty and oppression that we will eventually reverse the scourge of war from the earth.
I see Reagan now as a man who kills both his parents and comes to the jury begging for mercy because, after all, he's an orphan now. Or perhaps a better analogy is the school bully who, when the teacher breaks up the fight, says in all indignation that the fight started when the other boy hit him back. He's asking for $100 million because, after all, the Soviets are giving aid to the Sandinistas. But he has besieged the elected government of Nicaragua with a CIA-created army in Honduras, by blocking development credits around the world, by escalating their international isolation, by mining their harbors illegally with the CIA, and by having the CIA publish manuals to teach the rebels in Nicaragua how to kidnap, assassinate public officials, and blow up public buildings, as well as blackmail ordinary Nicaraguan citizens. Ronald Reagan wants $100 million to send to the Contras. Let him get it from his phony fascist friends. And do not.
good to see here today Black Americans, Haitians, Cubans, to mention something. If this struggle is going to go on, and it's going to go on, if it's going to be conducted correctly, if it's going to are the young people of the United States. We must have the support of young workers and young students. And they are here today with us. And let's recognize their participation here today with us. Let's applaud. Let's give them a big hand. For 4 years. For 4 years I couldn't stay here because of the threat of terrorists. I had to leave for New York. Now I'm back, and I'm staying, and I'm not leaving. My pleasure and my honor to introduce to you today Brenda Meyerson.
I asked to be able to just say a few words of our very next speaker, who will be the last speaker of the day. About 2 years ago, I started waking up every morning and feeling just deafened by the bombs, dreaming about the war. And I realized that the big war was in the future, and that was the one that I was hearing. And I started to work to stop the aid to the Contras and to stop the tragedy of what's happening in Central America. And when I went to learn about it, I became very confused because, like everybody else in this country, we just don't know what to believe. We get such a mix of information. And when I finally was just in utter frustration, I met a very wonderful person who I'm about to introduce to you, who spent 5 years as a journalist in Central America. And she told me where I didn't know what was really happening there. Today is a traditional Central America Day. A lot of people, including our opponents across the street, think that we call this rally as an incitement, but this is traditionally Central America Week. On Monday, March 24th, we will mark the 6th anniversary of the assassination of Archbishop Romero in El Salvador. And that is why we have an observance every year at this time. Many of you were with us last year when we did a caravan from here to Homestead Air Force Base in pursuit of peace in Central America. Well, Kathy Hirsch, who is the director of the American Friends Service Committee Peace and Justice Project, who is about to address you, was in El Salvador when Archbishop Romero was assassinated. In fact, she was one of the journalists who wrote the eulogy to him. And so I'd like to bring her up to do what we traditionally do this day every year. Kathy Hirsch.
I would just like to say that the egg on my pants doesn't bother me at all. In fact, I would rather have egg on my pants than egg on my face in the morning when the newspapers come out. In fact, when you think about the price that people like Archbishop Romero paid, and the American nuns, and the priests, and the catechists, and the labor organizers, it's a very small price to pay indeed. I'd like to talk about the spirit Archbishop Romero a little bit today, because that was initially the reason we gathered here today. And I pondered about what would be the best way for me to try to speak about something that I find it extremely emotional to talk about. And I decided to share with you the eulogy that ran during the week of his funeral on ABC News. And I know that there are a lot of people across the street making noise, but I think we can still hear here, and that's what we're here for. Most journalists have stories they always mean to write and never seem to find the time to do. The half-written reports lay in the back of the mind, pushed there by other priorities. The Hardner Nobel Peace Prize nominee in 1979, a courageous spokesman for the poor people of a country which seems headed for revolution. Yesterday was his funeral. He was killed by an assassin a week ago while celebrating Mass in the chapel of a clinic for clinically ill cancer patients that he founded in San Salvador. He had been threatened many times by extremists who feared his influence with the masses of El Salvador's poor. Last month, the Catholic radio station which broadcast his Sunday morning homilies across the tiny nation was destroyed by a powerful bomb. But tape recordings were made of his masses and sent around all over the country. People wanted and needed to hear what the man had to say. The story I wanted to write was about a brave human being who was bringing hope and dignity to people who had never had it. His defense of the rights of the poor was fierce and uncompromised. He spoke out defiantly, yet somehow naively, against the economic and political injustices in El Salvador. His weekly homilies became litanies of indignation. I heard many of them myself. He would recite the names of campesinos, catechists, student leaders, leftists, political reformists, innocent civilians who had been killed in the preceding week. This is how he would start out his homilies, just naming names, like the names on these crosses today. And he did not shirk from laying the blame at the door of the people responsible in El Salvador. But he always tendered his messages with hope and conciliation. Amid the harshness of a bloody political struggle, he appealed to the heart. What he said and what he stood for brought crowds of young and old to his masses. Often there would be hardly standing room in the cathedral. Women with varicose veins would stand for an hour and a half with their freshly scrubbed children, listening to everything he had to say. Whenever he moved the people with his words, the cathedral would clatter with the sound of applause. Afterwards, outside the church, the shy, unassuming little man would be engulfed by a tide of followers wanting to touch him or just be near him. They called him La Voz de los Sin Voz, the voice of the voiceless. The day Romero died, a U.S. Methodist minister who admired him called me on the telephone from Atlanta. He said, "I just needed to talk to someone, and I thought you would too." Romero had touched many people who had met him with his simplicity and humility. To observe him was to see goodness and dignity prevail in spite of hatred and cynicism. Archbishop Romero was regarded as a renegade by many within the Catholic Church, the traditionalists. He refused to pacify his people with promises of a better afterlife. He was a tireless defender of human rights and a decent life for the poor of El Salvador, and to some people that made him a very dangerous man. I'd like to share with you some of his words in his last homily. This is what made him viewed as such a dangerous person. I only wish the people across the street could also hear this, because we can all benefit from this. Do not consider me, please, an enemy. I am simply a pastor, a brother, a friend of the Salvadoran people, one who knows their sufferings, their anguish, their hunger, their feelings. It is in the name of these voices that I raise my voice to you to say, do not idolize your wealth, do not hoard it, do not let the rest die in hunger. I would like to make a special appeal, he went on to say, to the members of the Army, and specifically to the ranks of the National Guard, the police, and the military. Brothers, each one of you is one of us. We are not enemies. The peasants you kill are your own brothers and sisters. When you hear the voice of a man commanding you to kill, remember, instead the voice of God, thou shalt not kill. God's law must prevail. No soldier is obliged to obey an order contrary to the law of God. There is still time for you to obey your own conscience, even in the face of a sinful command to kill. I would like to ask you here today to pause for a moment and don't let the egg stain the inside of you. We must walk away from here and let it be written and let it be said that on March 20th in Miami, a peaceful rally took place. A rally for freedom for the peoples of all of Central America. A rally for freedom of speech in this town where it is so greatly endangered. So if we could, for just a moment, spend a moment of silence thinking about Archbishop Romero, thinking about the work that lays ahead for each and every one of us after today. The debate has just started. The struggle has just started. We have lots of work to do ahead of us, lots of educational work, and we can start right here today as we leave by showing that we are a people of peace. So may I ask for 1 minute of silence before we leave today? Let us walk in peace, brothers and sisters.
There's a channel, a TV channel today here from Buenos Aires, Argentina. And they covered this demonstration today. And let me tell you something, they were not supporting those in front across the street. Because we have the right to speak out, not surrounded by 100 policemen, to speak out without the threat of violence. But we have to speak out because we are right, and they are not. And we know that.
Yeah, right.
Chris?
From one of our people. This is a stink bomb right there. This is the tank cap, the diesel tank from one of the dump trucks or other such truck around. I don't know. And the rest, rocks.
When are they?
These are rocks that were thrown at us as we were standing at the torch of friendship.
Well, my friends, the road is here, and it's from Puerto Rico. So the struggle is long.
The rocks that were thrown at us, they wouldn't fit on this desk. This is only a very small collection. What actually was thrown at us, and it is amazing that none of our people were seriously hurt.
Where is that rock? Where is that rock?
What is that? What is that? How'd you get it?
Where you sit? Take them out. Yellow right. And then to my right.
Brenda Meyerson. Okay. Meyerson. I'm chairperson of the South Florida Peace Coalition, which is the umbrella group for 45 peace and justice groups in Dade and Broward County. Today we had a very successful demonstration at the Torch of Friendship with nearly 300 people and with many, many groups represented there. Some of our speakers today were the Reverend John Powers of the United Methodist Church, Reverend Linnea Pearson of the Grace Contrino Abrams Peace Education Foundation, Rabbi Romy Shapiro, Reconstructionist Rabbi from Temple Beth Or, Senator Jack Gordon from the State Senate, Todd Bernstein from the Young Democrats, Ray Fauntleroy from the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, Jack Lieberman representing La Casa, Margaret Shapiro from the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, Rose Jean Bart representing the Haitian community and the Haitian Refugee Center, Michael Friedman, State Representative, Patricia Ireland of the National Organization for Women, Marion Harris from the Coalition for a Free South Africa, and Kathy Hirsch from the American Friends Service Committee. Today, right here with us are people who also supported that rally, and they represent even more groups. This is a very broad cross-section of the community in Dade County that is opposed to the war in Central America. Here with us today, I'm going to start over here, are Don Freeland from the United Church of Christ, Coral Gables Congregational Church as well, Cliff Jones, who represents the the Progressive Student Union at Florida International University, Jane Brown, who's president of the Conch Shell Alliance, Rodney Thaxton of the Coalition for a Free South Africa, Len Kaminsky, representing the Haitian Refugee Center, Andres Gomez, speaking for the Cuban community, Jack Lieberman for La Casa and the Coalition for Non-Intervention in Central America, Patricia Ireland of the National Organization for Women, Ernie Maigo, who was the head of security today and who's from Union number 702 of the Eastern Machinists, Bill Loomis from the First Unitarian Church, and Robert Hawks of the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Workers, who's also on the Dade County Human Rights Commission. We think that today was a victory for us in Miami because we were able to demonstrate, because we were able to get out our message about Central America, though not entirely to our satisfaction. And that's why we've invited the press here this afternoon, so we would be able to say what we could not say amid the turmoil this afternoon. Our first speaker will be Jackie Lament.
Okay, well, I'd like to...
Oh, I'm sorry. I do wrong.
Right.
First speaker will be Andres Gomez. Sorry.
I want to address myself to the question of the counter-demonstration. First of all, I would like to say that those that were in that counter-demonstration are a shame to the Cuban community and to the Nicaraguan community. They do not represent the feelings nor the attitudes of the Cuban community. The Cuban community in Miami is, in its majority, a tolerant community, a community that respects the rights of others and the rights of others to speak about issues. It is this type of people, though, that when they're present today, only 2,000 to 3,000 of them, that have been called for by the Cuban radio stations in Miami, who are really the hardcore, intolerant type of people that have been able to coerce the rest of the Cuban community in Miami. We are extremely happy for the fact that a cross-section of our community was present at the activity today, in spite of the threats of violence that were announced through the Cuban radio stations and through the newspapers. We strongly oppose and object to the decision by the Miami City authorities to get a permit to demonstrate to this counter-demonstration groups